Okay, so now we have all the black down, and of course we'll still be working with the black and blending and, you know, all kinds of layers. So let's go in with our brown here. This would be the dark umber. And look at your nose very carefully, because noses are really different and there are some interesting shapes. So if you see, I'm kind of coloring where it's almost like a triangle, but then I'm skipping over some areas because they are different. It's like almost like a different level. You know, it's kind of rounded, you know, a little bit on the front of the face. So I don't want to color the whole thing brown, and I don't want to put really heavy layers either. So going back through, and I'm reshaping just a little bit more with my black. And now that I have all my black and the brown where I want it to go, or I guess my dark umber, I shouldn't say brown, I'm going to go back through with my 50% French gray, and I'm going to start blending some of these lighter areas in his nose. Now, the French gray has a little bit, you know, a little bit of a brown tint to it, so this works really well for his nose. And I'm just going to get the basic shape and just start working this dark umber in with the French gray. Adding a little bit on the sides here. Again, we're continuing to just layer upon layer, so I don't want to color all of it all at once. So I'm reshaping now this side. His nose right in this area, I don't know if it's like a, maybe he's got like a scar or something on his nose, but it kind of pulls up just a little bit on both sides. So back with my dark umber, I'm starting to blend some more these hard changes here with the tones and colors. And then still just reshaping the nose and making sure it's the way I want it to look. Just keep working with your black, very light pressure. You don't want to go heavy here. You want to make sure that you can add layers on top of it. And we're just kind of bouncing back and forth between the black and the dark umber and just making the nose look like the picture. Now in the middle of the nose I added a little streak there. If you look real close, sometimes noses get almost like wrinkles or scarring as well. I'm not sure if that's what he has going on, if it's a wrinkle or a scar. I mean, his nose is pretty scarred up on top, so I would suggest that it might have been an old scar. But just keep working these areas with your black and your dark umber. Maybe add a little light umber in there. So after this dark umber, I'm going to add more of the French Gray 50, and I'm just going to keep working this area until I'm satisfied. And I just want to lighten it up a little bit. I feel like it was getting lost a little bit, this nice, shiny spot. So So at the top of the nose, I'm starting with my light peach again, and I'm basing out some of this area. I think when I get tunnel vision, I do tend to jump around a lot, and there's so much going on in his nose, it can feel overwhelming. So doing a little bit of it at a time, can really help to combat that, to make it so that you don't get overwhelmed, and just doing small shapes at one time and then maybe moving to another area. Now, that might not be how you work, but that is how I do. And, I just think that, whatever way gets it done and that you are satisfied with your piece, that is the correct way for you. So, yeah, so that's how I combat my tunnel vision and sometimes crossed eyes. So now I'm just really focusing on getting all of this area of his nose based out in this light peach color. I'm trying to keep mindful of where his scars are so that I don't lose those shapes. Because I drew it on with some chalk, it does flake off really easily, or it does smudge off, so I want to make sure that I don't lose those. So just spacing out, trying to be careful on which direction my pencil is going. This is shorter hair, so I really don't need to pay attention much to that. I just need to make sure that I'm not getting too streaky. I don't want to put heavy layers on so that it looks like there's some thick, long hair on his nose. I don't want that effect. My light umber, and we're going to start working around the areas that, just are scarred up, and just adding a little bit of color here and there, all the while looking at our reference photo. So I'm going to start down here. And I'm almost doing like a small circle motion, or a quick circle motion, if that's, what you want to call it. But I'm not really worrying too much about the direction of the hair because, like I said before, it's so short on his nose. You can't really see the direction of his hair. You just see like little bits of color here and there. So I just want to go through and lightly add some of these textures and some of these colors in here to blend later. With your French Gray 70, keep working out these areas closer to the nose and start adding little bits of color here. And now using your warm gray 70, start blending out some of that French gray 70 and adding little bits of, just different colors within. I'm not using a whole lot of pressure. I'm just adding little bits of color. So this area that I left intentionally blank, I am starting to fill it in. I did put in a light layer of the French Gray 70, and I'm going over top of it now with the warm gray 70. And I just want to blend those together to give it like that nice brownish gray look. And I'm going to go back in with my black here and start to blend the nose, the top of the nose, up with that fur that's on his nose. Now I'm using little circles. I'm not doing a flicking motion at all. I'm just, blending these areas together, sort of making them look like they belong together, and just tying it all together with the nose. And a touch of black in here, working my way up and getting some of these scars now darkened, and we'll come back through and blend them out as well. Keep using your black to map out these scratches and scars on his nose. And just keep looking at your reference photo to make sure that they're going in the right direction. Some are darker than others, and it can get confusing if you're not watching. But take your time and just slowly work up these layers. So still working with the black, going through and add little details where all of his little scratches and scars are. I'm not giving a whole lot of pressure, and I'm using the little circles. Again, I'm not really worrying too much about the direction of the hair, because the hair is so short that you kind of only just see, not really like the individual hairs, but you do see just the shapes and the shadows. This is the French Gray 20, and I'm just adding in, there's a light scarring across his nose. And I'm just going to kind of darken it up here, and then I'll go back through and sort of tone it down a little bit. This looks like it was a scar that could have been superficial and the hair grew back. And I'm just looking at my reference photo to see where else I need to add some light areas. Coming back through with the black, keep adding onto his scarring. And just remember, this is just the base. You're just sort of mapping out where all of his little nicks and little scars are. So we'll go back over these and it'll look more fur-like. So this is just the base and mapping out where everything needs to go. So just keep looking at your reference photo and adding where you see fit. Now I'm going in now with my light umber and I'm adding just a light layer of it. I don't want to, do real heavy strokes because his nose looks really soft. Even though it is scarred up, the hair looks really soft and really short. So just add a little bit of color here and then keep working around. Still using the light umber. I'm just sort of blending all of these colors out. Now I'm going over top of the dark area right there, but I'm still using it on the lighter areas too to try to get it to blend together. Again, we want it to look like it belongs to each other and it's not just sticking out, like a sore thumb. We want it to look natural. We want it to look smooth, like a good smooth transition. Using the goldenrod now just to add a little bit more color in his nose to tie it into his forehead and his cheeks. This is just light layers again. You're just blending out some of that light umber that we had, just adding it to it. Now using the French Gray 50, we're going to go back through and get this area up here to blend in with the nose a little bit better, and just add a light layer in here. Again, I'm not really worrying too much about the direction of the fur. I'm just sort of adding a little bit of color in here, a little bit of splash of color. I'm just continuing to soften the nose with the French Gray 50%, and we're just going to keep moving in little areas around all of his scars. And it's not a whole lot of pressure, but I am blending a bit to get that soft texture on his nose. And this area is not much different than the top area, so again, I'm just blending out some of these softer areas. Now with my warm gray 70, I'm just going to blend a little bit of colors in there. I had my 50%, but I decided I wanted to go a little darker with these scarring and blend them out just a little wee bit. We're just sort of adding color to it. We're not really giving it much of shape. We're just kind of giving it some texture in the fur that's on his nose. And since his nose fur has, you know, a lot less length to it, we want to keep our strokes small, or even the circle, the tiny circles. working my way around his nose and all of this scarring. We want to make sure that it blends well with the rest of his face. So just keep adding bits of color. And now we're really starting to see some depth in his nose and some high spots and low spots. It's really starting to come together very nicely. And now just go back in with your dark brown and start to blend in the corners of his nose up to his eyes. We just want to add a little bit of color to make it look like it belongs so that it doesn't stick out like crazy, like the yellow and the creams up here. We want it to blend with the nose really well. At least have a nice smooth transition from the fur color. Switching over to black, I'm going to darken some of these areas in here. Going with the like the speckling motion, I just want to create some of this texture in here. I don't want dark spots, I just want almost like shadows. And switching to my goldenrod, I want to just add a little bit of color in here because, again, we want it to look like the rest of his face and we want it to transition well. We don't want it to just be a block of orange on his forehead and then it's just like a brown and gray nose. So we want to blend it to make it look like a nice smooth transition. Now the light umber here, just adding little bits of color again, sort of randomly, but also keeping in mind where, you know, the high spots are in his nose and, you know, maybe dimples and all that. And now with my French Gray 50, I'm just going to add some light spots in here. So some of his fur almost sticks over top of these scars, and you want it to almost look like layered. You know, the fur is kind of coming over top of the scars. You don't want it to just be like a black streak on his face, because then it wouldn't be realistic enough. Because if you just have a scar across his face, you know, the hair grows around it and sometimes lays over top of it. So we're just sort of toning down, you know, the black just a little bit whenever we put, you know, this color over top. Now with the dark umber, still working through blending in this area. Even though it is, you know, his nose is higher than his cheeks, we want to make sure that it looks right. And then around some of these scars, we want it to be a little bit darker. Not a lot of pressure. You want to make sure that you are aware of how heavy you are drawing with your pencil. And it really doesn't matter too much on the pastel mat because it does take lighter layers on top of it very well, like I've said before. But if you have something like a Bristol Smooth, or if you have, you know, any other like a Strathmore toned paper, then you might struggle with putting lighter colors on top. It could just smear it. It could just burnish it, and then you have a problem. I mean, you can always use the tape method and pull some up, but it's just better to be a little bit more cautious with those smooth papers that don't have much of a tooth and don't take as many layers as the pastel mat. Using the French Gray 20 still, I'm just going through and lightening up some of these areas. You want to put highlights in there to make it look like his nose is sticking up out. You don't want it to lay flat. So just very carefully going through and giving some highlights. And now I am paying attention to where the direction of my fur is going. Now for the bases, I wasn't too concerned with it, but now that I'm going back through, I am really watching the direction with my highlighting and also using dark brown beside it. Still using the French Gray 20, I am going through and still just taking my time, lightly putting different layers of highlights on his nose. As you can see, it's a very slow process, but I want to make sure that I get the hairs where I want them to be. Now I know I've talked about in other videos about Pastelmat with Prismacolors. Now the Prismacolors are very soft. The core is very soft, and with Pastelmat you might want to make sure that you have lots of extras, like secondary pencils that you can jump to if you run out, because the Pastelmat will eat these pencils. I have used the Polychromos, and they seem to have a harder core to them, and it doesn't eat them as quickly. But I have noticed that with the Prismacolors, I am either sharpening a lot, or my tips are really blunt very quickly, which isn't a terrible thing to have blunt tip, but I mean, in this case for the lion, I need a sharp point. So now if you're doing like a dog or another animal with like really soft fuzzy fur, the blunt tip is always helpful because it doesn't have a whole lot of sharpness, I guess, as I want to say. You've got like the fuzzball kind of effect rather than pulling out individual hairs. It almost gets like chunks of hairs rather than just individual hairs like a whisker. So this is helpful to have a sharp tip in this tutorial, is what I find, but there is use for the blunt tip as well. I'm still just adding color with the dark umber, and I'm going to come back with some white, and we're going to brighten up some individual hairs on top of his nose. So just continue to work and blend some of these colors together. It's starting to look really good with the top of his forehead with all that nice brown and gold fur. So I'm just brightening up some of these little spots. Keep working through these areas, adding some highlights, and just take your time. Really look at your reference photo and really decide where you want these to go. Again, I'm keeping a very sharp point because this is very fine detail in here. I'm not really looking for a blunt tip. And now let's darken up a little bit on the corner of his nose. I'm using the dark umber again and adding more color. I'm going to work a little bit on this side too, brighten up some of these details. I'm going to work up the side of his nose as well, because the right side is starting to look really, really nice. We're just going to continue to work all these details like we did on the other side. Now just adding a little bit more individual hairs right here. And just pulling some out and getting some more value. And then also on some of these scars, I'm adding a little bit more texture with this black. I'm just sort of pulling out some little lines in between where the hair is and making it look like it goes deeper. Keep adding little bits and pieces here. Very light strokes. Again, we're just adding little bits of shadows, shading, and texture. I'm going to be switching over to the French Gray 20 again and adding a few more highlights. As you can see, his nose is really starting to turn out well. And then we're going to highlight a little bit further with the white. With the white, I am using a little bit of a flicking motion of the hair here. I didn't want it to just be a line. So you want to kind of make the edges a little bit more jaggy, make it look more like hair. Again, not too much pressure. We just want to add a little bit, little touches, subtle things. Still just adding some black here and there. Sorry if you hear my chickens in the background. They've decided that since I'm recording again, that they're going to come over and visit. So usually I get a couple crows in my videos hollering rooster. Okay, this area is starting to look really nice. I'm really liking the feel of the texture of his hair right here, and seeing the different textures within the fur. We just want to add a little bit more color to make it match above, and still some more highlights on top of it. Again, I have the Pastel matte paper, so I can take a lot more layers. If you don't have this, you should try to get one to even mess with or play with. You might be able to find a local artist who already has the Pastel matte and will let you buy a sheet off of them to play with. Or they also have on Amazon, they do have the little, sample papers of Pastel matte, because it can get pretty expensive. But if you don't have that, that type of money to spend on just paper, which is totally fine. I mean, I kind of sacrificed quite a bit just to get my set of papers. So, not everybody can afford a big chunk of money like that, which if you can, that's fantastic. And I would definitely recommend trying it. Okay, I'm just highlighting little areas. We're almost done with this video. So, I hope to see you on the 7th one, where we go down the face and do, the whiskers and his little cheeks. I guess would it be his muzzle? Not sure what they call the front of a lion's face. I know on a dog they call it a muzzle, but I guess we'll just call it, his lips. So in the next video, we'll be continuing down into his lips and starting to add more shading down there. I'm really liking the way that his nose is looking, but we might also come back and touch up some more spots. I'm just going to add a little bit of shading down here underneath that scratch that was there. And we are coming to the end of this video. It's about an hour long. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope to see you for video 7. If you don't know already and you are looking for more instruction, I do have a Patreon page. It is in the link below. You're more than welcome to come visit and see what I do there and what I offer. So comment, like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so that you can tell whenever I get more videos up. Thank you and have a great day.